Good morning, everybody. My clock says 9 o'clock. This is Richard Calhoun with Creekside Realty. I'm going to be doing the statistics presentation for today. I did just pass out the handout, so I just want to go over some stuff real quick. The handout is at tinyurl.com, RE market graphs, plural, handout singular, and today's date 2020-05-02. And that did just get posted about 3 minutes ago. That's how quick my deadlines are. So if you went on earlier and it wasn't there, it is there now. It's just the slide deck that we'll be going over. To get to next week's meeting, it's the same format, tinyurl.com, RE market graphs, plural, next Saturday's date, 2020-05-09. And to get to the archives, which will be up later today with any luck, we just dropped the 8-digit date code at the end. This meeting code for Zoom should be the same through the 8th of August, but it may change at any time due to problems. I think most of you have probably been on this meeting before, so I'm not going to go over definitions, but I put it on here so that you have it for the slide deck. So this is the first slide for this week, and it is a new slide, as are the next several. What I'm doing is just on this slide plotting active inventory for 2020, which is the red line, compared to the median income, which is sort of the gold line back here, for the last 5 years. And if you look at the pattern, it's essentially the same. There's a little perturbation back here, but I think that had everything to do with Super Bowl and nothing else. Here's shelter in place. You can see that we dropped down and we are now below the normal inventory, but when I say below, we're basically at 100%. So we were a little bit above, because the red line you read on the right-hand side of the graph, we were somewhat above back here. We came down pretty much to normal, spiked up, shelter in place was announced, we dropped down, and we're basically running at 100% of the inventory out there. I will throw out the caveat that a lot of that inventory is occupied and technically not available to be shown. Now what I'm looking at is the number of new listings by list date. And here the impact of shelter in place is obviously way clearer. You can see the red line right here just dropping. And I'm going to change my laser pointer because I think that's easier for people to see. So you can see the red line here just free falling. And we came down and we're basically somewhere around 45–50% of the normal of new listings each week. And that's the ratio compared to the 5-year median. And for the 5 years, I'm using 2019, 18, 17, 16, and 15. Figured those were pretty basic years. The actual number of listings is the blue line here that you read on the left-hand side. So we're getting about 300 new listings a week. And you can see it drop down lower when we couldn't show anything, and then as soon as they announced we could show vacant houses, it jumped back up. I expect that next week we will see this number up again, because starting next weekend we will be able to show even occupied homes. Moving on to the next things is I decided to look at offers accepted by the same criteria, and this would be by the offer accepted date. And basically you can see we were going along and we were basically actually declining here, but again, I think that was because we had a Super Bowl this year and we have not had a Super Bowl in the last 5 years, 2015 through 19. Super Bowl ended, we came back up and we were essentially right here at 100%. We did dip down, but I think this dip down is a retroactive dip down. By that I mean shelter in place was announced. People that were in escrow recently, a few of those backed out, which then would decrease the number of offers. So the offer was accepted, but then failed. And since I use a 5-week moving period, that offer was no longer there and didn't count. Shelter in place happened and you had offers that were never even accepted. And that's what caused that free fall. And then you can see right at, starting at this point, we had an increase. And again, that was when we went from not being able to show real estate at all until we were able to show real estate that was vacant, not occupied. And starting Monday, we'll be able to show any property as long as the seller's out of the property. Moving on to close of escrows, you can see again, we were up here just about normal, somewhere maybe around 90% of normal. Shelter in place was announced, and we basically did a free fall down, not as rapidly as number of offers because people were contractually obligated to close. And now we get down again because we are closing a greater percentage of the offers that were accepted prior to shelter in place being announced. Moving on to canceled listings. And again, same concept. You can see the canceled listings spiked right when shelter in place was announced. And then boom, we come back down, and we're basically lower than we were at the beginning part of the year, which is sort of interesting on a percentage basis. And I take that back. That makes perfect sense. So here we were basically canceling about 120% of normal, some weeks higher, some weeks lower. And now down here, we're actually only canceling about 80% of normal. But if we have fewer new listings coming on the market, there's going to be fewer people to cancel. Then you could argue the number of active listings is the same, so the number of cancellations are active. But I think the whole key takeaway here is people reacted initially. They did their knee-jerk reaction, and now we're coming back down. We're not back down to historical levels and the levels you'd expect, but we're going that way. And obviously on all these slides, this is zero going forward because we're not there. We're right now at week 17, so we have a data point for week 17, no data for week 18, so it drops down to zero. Withdrawn listings, I included this. To me, it's a completely meaningless number. First off, you can't find out what happened a year ago in withdrawn listings. And the reason for that is withdrawn listings is a temporary class or status, and once the expiration date arrives, the MLS automatically moves it from a withdrawn listing to a expired listing, even though it was withdrawn earlier. So there are people that are talking about, cancellation listings, withdrawn listings, and stuff are up 45% from last year, but there's no way to get a baseline from last year unless you had to happen to be tracking it. And I think those individuals and organizations are simply pulling up by withdrawn date without realizing the number of withdrawn dates after about a year essentially goes to zero. And that's why there's no percentage on this slide. With that, we will move back to more of the normal stuff that we've been looking at. So this is the overbidding for this current week. And this is actually an improvement from last week, which I'm not sure I understand other than people got used to it or whatever, because these are closings for the 5 weeks ending on May 1st, yesterday at midnight. And I'm not sure why there's more overbidding other than potentially buyers were coming out after shelter in place, paying more than the seller was asking because the seller was desperate. But that was actually an improvement, so it was nice to see that kind of thing. Now I'm going to look at days of unsold inventory. Here is from April 11th, and I'm doing this just to show you how rapidly the market changes and why I like using days of unsold inventory as an indicator. You can see a lot of red, a little bit of gray over here on the coast and down in South County, and just a little bit of blue on the expensive stuff along the San Mateo, Santa Clara County border. Now you move to the 18th, and notice how the amount of blue really expanded, the amount of gray expanded up into the Milpitas areas and into Saratoga. So basically, in a nutshell, your reds are way down, your blues are up, the market's slowing. We move on, wrong way. Move on to the 25th. Now it's almost no red. The only place that's red is Foster City. The grays expanded, which was a neutral market. The blues expanded. And now we're here, and all of a sudden we have red popping back up along the Bay Cities, even the coast. And the coast actually makes some sense to me because, summertime people, might be more active along the coast, that kind of thing. But, I wanted to share that we've had an improvement in the activity level compared to the available inventory level. So here you can see days of unsold inventory for the 3 counties. And when I say 3 counties, it's Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, and the third county is San Mateo and Santa Clara County combined condo townhouses. And you can see that all 3 were increasing, which was a slowing market. You can basically see a plateau, and then you can see a decrease. And again, just because it's a unique way of me representing the data, these level spots are not real data, and by that, we can't have data in the future. But what I did is I take my normal span, in other words, from here back, here to the left, is 5 weeks of data. This first data point is based on 3 weeks of data, and this is based on 1 week of data. And the concept here is, if you look at the most recent data, it's improving over the last. You have to be careful because it can be statistically fluctuations, which is why I've done it. But when you have a downward trend, that the 3 week and the 1 week trend are all in the downward direction, this would tend to suggest when we're here next week discussing the 5 week data, the days of unsold inventory will also be lower than it is now, which is an improving marketplace. Here is the all 22, which is hard to see, but I do this so people can pick out their favorite color, probably more likely when they print it out or view it on their screen. Here's your available inventory. Again, you can see the raw numbers drop down, steadily increasing. But in a normal year, we would have been increasing from up here before this drop. We're now increasing from down here. I actually expect an increase in the number of new listings coming on the market this week, getting ready for next weekend, the first weekend we can actually show occupied properties. And again, there's restrictions on. And again, here is the same data. The thing that's nice about inventory, it's spread out a little bit so you can see the different micro market areas. And some of my micro market areas you can see are down here with only 10 homes. That's probably Foster City would be my guess. Yep, it is. So that data is really questionable as far as value. I like to have 200, and you can see not a single one of my individual micro market areas has 200 units. And the reason the data is flat here is there's no way for me to do inventory for the last 3 weeks. It's inventory as of last night at midnight. So it's a flat, and I don't estimate or guesstimate the numbers. Here's the number of offers for the last 5 weeks. You can see we were basically going up. We hit shelter in place. We came roaring back down. We were allowed to show properties that were vacant, and all of a sudden we start increasing. And then here I've adjusted the 3 week sale data by looking at the number of sales for 3 weeks, dividing it by 3 to get 1 week sale, multiplying it by 5. Otherwise, the number would go down regardless. And then 1 week. So actually, that says that as we've gotten into the more recent time frame, and again, this is 5 weeks going back from yesterday through, so that's, impacting all the shelter in place time. But the last week, people are getting used to it, and we're showing the vacant properties and selling them. Here are the 5 micro market areas, and you can see pretty much every micro market area has been increasing. There's this notable exception up here. One major exception are coming down the most, but I guess that's the same trend for most of them. The big difference then is this one that I can't identify which area it is basically flat instead of going up. This is the number of closed transactions, again, for the 3 counties, with the third county being San Mateo, Santa Clara combined. It looks like, actually, I would almost suspect I did. So this is probably saying that we've worked through all the closed transactions, and now the number of closings are way down, because if I said this data point right here was 1 week's of data and I multiplied it by 5, I'd be closing 2,500 transactions in a week, and that simply isn't going to happen. Here is all 22 micro market areas. Nothing really noticeable other than the trend is the same. Moving on to the frequency of overbidding. Again, it came up, it was doing well. It really plateaued, but now this is a little negative news. If you look at the 3 week data and the 1 week data, it looks like the frequency of overbidding is actually coming back down. So I think what that's telling us is for the homes that are on the market, the buyers aren't sensing the need to pay more because there isn't as much activity out there. The 22 different micro market areas, basically the trend is the same. If you look in the background, there's a dip and then an up for some, but most of them are moving around, dropping down. The 3 week data is lower, and then the 1 week data is even lower. Overbid magnitude. The first one was frequency, so that's how often people are overbidding, and this is how dramatically they're overbidding. Are they paying 5% over? Are they paying 10% over? And again, you can see it came up, it held relatively constant, and then it's been coming down the last couple of weeks as people got through it. I suspect that this number is going to start going back up again. But, you know, this tells us what the buyers are sensing. One of the things I try to do with my statistical analysis is look at what the marketplace is doing. The concept being the sum of the actions of all the buyers is far smarter than any modeling or any person. And so if you look at what all the buyers are doing and all the sellers are doing, you get a better idea of what the market is. This is all the different micro market areas. Moving on to sold price, I will caution this is the bottom 10%, so there's a lot more fluctuation. So when I got down to 3-week data, you can see I dipped down, then 1-week data, I went back up again. That's that instability is one of the primary reasons that I went with 5-week data. And when I started this back in '97, I looking at data from 1 to 7 weeks. And I was actually a little surprised at the results, but 1 through 3 weeks got increasingly stable as I increased the number of weeks, but was still pretty fluctuating. Week 4 and 5 were very stable. Week 6 and 7 got more unstable, which is not what you would expect. And when I started looking at the calendar, turns out there's a lot of holidays that are about 5 weeks apart. And so if we put in 6 weeks, at some point you have 2 holidays involved, and every holiday negatively impacts real estate except for Mother's Day and Valentine's Day. That's all the different micro market areas for the 10 percentile pricing. And 10 percentile pricing is the lowest price point in a geographical area. This is the median price, way more stable because you're looking at the bulk of the properties and they're congested closer together. I think this is noteworthy. The top end, the 90 percentile, has come down far more than the median and the 10 percentile. Between Santa Clara County and San Mateo County, there was about a $200,000 difference. It shot up just before shelter in place to $400,000. You come over here and there's only about $100,000 based on the most recent data. You come back to the last real data point and it's back to 200,000. So basically it looks to me like San Mateo County in this time frame overshot where the market was, at least compared to what Santa Clara is doing. Here is all the different micro market areas. And I'm not going to spend time, as I haven't been on these, because you can come back and review them on the slide deck or anything like that. And here is the 90 percentile pricing, which is what I was sort of talking about before. This is the top 10%. And because you're at the upper end, there is even more instability in the pricing. Nothing really noteworthy in my opinion. There's the micro market areas. Duration of escrows. This actually caught me a little bit by surprise. We got shelter in place, and I don't have that data point on here for some reason, but it's basically right about here. You can see right where the data changed, all of a sudden days in escrow went up because difficulties in closing the transactions and small delays happened. And, you know, in San Mateo County, you went from basically 25 days in escrow up to 30. But the surprising is right here, where we're starting to dip down. It'd be interesting to see if that trend continues or if that is just sort of an aberration. Again, the different micro market areas. Days on market. This data point right now is basically completely meaningless. And you'll notice that all the slides went down to 0. And the reason they slid down to 0 is the MLS froze the days on market. So if you're listing a property in shelter in place, you're going to have 0 days on market. But what that means, what the data is sharing with us, since April 22nd, at least 50% of the data, of the 50% of the properties being sold were sold and were only listed after shelter in place was in effect. And the reason I'm saying that is if it was on the day before shelter in place, there'd be at least 1 day on the market and this number wouldn't be 0. So the 50% point is indicating that more than half the properties that are selling came on during shelter in place. Here is for all the different areas. Here is the raw numbers for each of the different micro market areas. This is San Mateo County. This is condo townhouse. This is the thing that's causing us the problem with COVID-19. And what I want to point out right now is our rate for doubling is more than every 30 days in Santa Clara County. So we have definitely flattened the curve. And that brings up the last slide, which is how to get on there. The handout again, and these formats will stay the same. tinyurl.com is /RE market graphs, plural, is my root URL for this meeting. Handout and the date gives you the handout for today's meeting. Nothing after the graphs gives you the archives of this presentation. Next weekend presentation you put on next week's date, which is the 9th. And with that, I will open it up to questions and see if anyone unmics themselves.
Oh, I have a questions on the data on page 8.
All right.
And I'm not clear about the red. Is the red indicates normal? Or it's the Santa Clara? I'm not sure.
So on slide
Page 8, yes.
So this is the page 8 you were talking about?
Okay, I look at the corner if it's page 8. Yeah. So I think that the red color is this. It's a normal, right? I am not clear about this red. Is a Santa Clara or the.
On all these initial slides that were new this week, and I didn't explain it, so thank you for the question. I wanted to look at what was happening rapidly, and so even though my normal focus is on the different micro markets, these initial slides were all on what I would call the macro market, which is Santa Clara County, San Mateo County combined, single family condos, townhouses combined, which is something I normally don't do. The red line is the data for 2020 compared to the 5-year median. So the gold line here is the 5-year median, and the 5 years I used were 2015 through 2019 to sort of establish a base year, because real estate is extremely cyclical. So you need to establish what to expect, and I did that by using a 5-year median, and then I plotted the real data, which is the blue line, and did a ratio between them. So basically you can see the blue line spikes up, and so does the percentage, and then both come down together. So the red line is the important line, which is why I did it in red, but it's the percentage of this year's data to what you'd expect it to be.
Okay, so the blue line is the real data?
Is real data. So in other words, in 2020, and I think that, and the red, and the blue line and the gold line you read on the left-hand side, the red line you read on the right-hand side. If we go back any other slides, here is the same concept. This is slide number 6. I highlighted the right-hand axis in red to sort of give the thought process. You read the red line on the right-hand side. So the blue line is the raw data for 2020, and this is the number of closings, so you can see it's coming down. Mm-hmm. The gold line is the normal 5-year, so you can see that the number of closings should have been going up, and then the red line is the percentage between the current data point and what it should have been.
Okay, that's very clear now.
So just a quick question. Could you share with us what the data point or what the approximate price is at the low end of the 10th percentile? Is it like 2 million some? I mean, what is the low end of that 10th percentile? And then the same related question, what's the high end of the 90th percentile? Just so I can kind of see where those percentiles start and stop.
Okay, let me pull up the graph, and I assume you're talking about for county data, not each one of the micro market areas.
Right, just for Santa Clara County.
Okay, Santa Clara County is in red, and so the 90 percentile, the low point, and this is projected data, so I don't want to give you that number. So here, that's pretty close. So there it is on the screen. I'm assuming that's showing up for you. It's for the 5-week period of time that ended Friday night at midnight. The number for the 90 percentile is $2,675,000. That's the current data. We peaked out, and I have 10 minutes left. We peaked out at basically 2.8 million, and we started the year at 2,625. So we went from 2625 up to 28, and we're basically real close down to 268. So we'll still have some appreciation for the year for Santa Clara County. So that's what you wanted for the 90 percentile, and you essentially want the same for the 10 percentile, I think is the request. So basically the 10 percentile in Santa Clara County is 890,000. And it started off the year, it looks like right at 800,000. Yep. So it's up 90%. So even with shelter in place impact, the median for not the median, the 10 percentile for Santa Clara County has gone up 10%. And we really don't have a peak to pick up on the 10 percentile. It's basically been a climb up. You know, it basically was flat through here, and then basically starting on February 28th, it jumped up a little bit, and then it actually went up again. It started going up on March 11th. Now, you might say that's really bizarre, but again, you have to remember these are closing. So these, you know, and I'm looking back on 5 weeks in time frame, and then you had a 4-week escrow. So you're going back 29. You're going back not 29. You're going back 9 weeks. So without a calendar in front of me, 9 weeks from March 13th would probably been just about when the Super Bowl ended. And in my opinion, a local Super Bowl is like a major holiday, and then basically prices have been going up ever since.
Okay, great. Thank you, Richard.
You're welcome, Jess. Well, I don't see anyone unmiking themselves, and there's no reason for us to stay online if people don't have questions. I guess I'll say thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Okay, Richard, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Richard.
thank you.
You're welcome.